What's up, everyone, and welcome back to Journey to You. I'm Courtney, and welcome to episode 9. So to date, all of the episodes have been recorded with the intent to help others and to shed light on the various topics that we've covered, but this is one that I'm recording really to help myself. So there are a lot of opinions that I have on the topic, but I haven't really fleshed all of them out. I kind of feel like I may or may not be on my own with this one, but I feel like it's still super important to cover. So hopefully by recording this episode, I'm able to validate my own experience and possibly the experience of other people. So you might wonder what I mean by oversexualization. And in the most basic terms, my understanding is that oversexualization is the practice of excessively sexualizing a person or thing. So in the context of this episode, it's the idea that Black women and girls are often seen as sexual objects before anything else. Along with that, a lot of Black women and girls are objectified and demoralized. And I also feel like it heavily influences body image. There's this constant battle between what we feel about our bodies and how we should feel about our bodies based on how other people perceive us. And that's something that we'll get into shortly when I explain the backstory and why we're even covering this topic in the first place. I think everything that I've mentioned also plays heavily into this whole idea that Black women are innately promiscuous and why young Black girls are often labeled fast or are demonized for having relationships with people of the opposite sex. And it's just a very limiting idea, which I think impedes the self-discovery of a lot of Black women. And I see it as an issue. So I feel like the whole issue really impedes Black girls' ability to get to know themselves. And so it can be tough to find yourself when you're dealing with the projections that other people are constantly placing onto you, especially people of authority. I could really go on and on because I think that the stuff that I've mentioned also prevents people from seeing Black women and girls as victims. If we believe that Black women have this innate promiscuity, then there's no way that we can really lend ourselves to Black women who need help or who need support in the face of adversity. Like, it's really just that simple. I've seen it, but I've also lived it, and people just didn't see me as a victim. For instance, like I put myself in the wrong company, and so I shared responsibility for people who treated me wrong, and I really feel like that's problematic. So again, another warning, you guys, this is not an objective episode. This is something that has affected me personally, and I feel like it still affects me to this day. And so, yes, I'm going to do my best to stay on top of my feelings. I guess we can start with more recently. So a couple of weeks ago, I had a conversation with my cousins who were suggesting that I get into modeling. And number one, that's like a huge compliment coming from them because my cousins are absolutely stunning, and I just felt like that was very kind of them. But the answer was no. Like, I don't think modeling is for me. So when I was explaining this, my cousin asked me why. And she's like, how come you don't feel confident enough to model? So I'd never really thought about my decision being related to a lack of confidence. But when I sat with myself and I thought about it, it's like, yeah, it does have something to do with that. But I feel like for as long as I can remember, I've had to manage the perception of other people, especially when it comes to my body. Growing up, a lot of times girls are taught to cover up and to be mindful of like how much skin is showing. While young women are being lectured, young boys should also be lectured. Everybody should be lectured about seeing people as humans and not as objects, first and foremost. So fast forward to another transitional stage in my life. I was graduating high school, and for prom, this is my first time having extensions that were not braids. So like I had clip-ins, and they were like curled up nicely, and I felt good, right? It was my first time having hair that long. And I took some pictures, and a lot of my friends got it. They were like, Court, this looks like a hair campaign, they were feeling it. I hadn't seen myself with hair like that. My friends hadn't seen it, and they were immediately supportive. Unfortunately, my family didn't see it that way. The way that they handled things was super hurtful to me. You're coming into yourself as a person or as a young woman. What do? How does anybody become stable or solid? I didn't feel like I had a say over my own body at the time, and that's just a very wild concept to me. Also, like while I share on the internet, I'm a pretty private person, and so to have my body be the topic of discussion mortified me. I wish that I could have just dissolved in those moments. I just remember feeling very small. When are Black women allowed to grow into themselves? When are we allowed to just be without everybody projecting their ideas onto us and telling us what we should be doing with our bodies and what we shouldn't be doing with our bodies? And so now I'm very intentional about establishing my self-worth and also about establishing any confidence that's associated with my body. And I really try not to be so harsh. It's difficult when you're kind of just conditioned to fit the mold for other people. There has to be a way for Black women to express themselves without being seen as sexual objects. Like, I believe that in my heart, and I hope to figure that out soon so that I don't have to think so deeply about wearing shorts or about wearing a dress. It shouldn't be like that, especially when I know myself and I know my character. And I could completely understand if I had put myself in a position to be objectified sexually, but I didn't. It was a matter of being creative and a matter of just liking myself. And I felt like I wasn't afforded that. So everyone, as you know, I don't have all of the solutions, especially when it comes to this topic. I feel like it's going to take a lot to have any sort of cultural shift. I can only speak to what has worked for me personally. So now I want to get into mass and journaling because they've helped me reclaim myself, my identity, my body, and journaling has definitely helped me just make sense of my thoughts and my feelings surrounding this sort of thing. So when I say mass, I'm referring to the type of mass that takes place during a Caribbean carnival. I don't know that I've mentioned that on here, but I'm of Trinidadian and Jamaican descent. So mass is something that we partake in, and it's not something that all Caribbean people will take part in, but it's something that I enjoy. And mass will take place during carnival time, and it's where participants will dress up in costumes and attend the grand parade. So while that's the shortest way that I could explain what mass is, there's a lot of history behind it, and so my explanation really does it no justice. I would encourage everybody to look into it. It's something that I hold very dear to my heart. So as I think of the events that I mentioned in the last segment, I feel like it kind of makes sense that I attracted a partner that didn't want me to play mass. Of course, they had their own reasons, but that situation created so much internal conflict, and I kind of feel like it was sort of the beginning of the end, because while people just look at carnival and they think, oh, it's just like a bunch of feathers and loud music, like for some people like myself, it's a very spiritual thing, and it's something that I feel very connected to. And of course, there are people who participate in mass solely for the fun of it, which is great, but that's not the case for everybody. So I'm choosing to speak on Trinidad because it's a culture that I can speak to firsthand. I can say that some of the most religious people in Trinidad are still proponents of mass, and they are still advocates for it because it's a huge part of our culture. It created so much conflict because it's like, again, even as an adult, I had found myself in a situation where somebody else was telling me what to do with my body. I did try to compromise, and now it's so crazy to even consider that because, No, I don't suggest that anybody compromise when it comes to that sort of thing. I feel like you should do what you want to. I wouldn't encourage anybody to stick around where they can't do what they please with their body. I think that's extremely unhealthy, and just know that there is somebody out there who will respect you regardless. I feel like mass has helped me to find that bodily autonomy that I feel like all people should have. I do feel like everyone should be afforded at least the opportunity to feel liberated, to feel comfortable in their bodies, and to be able to express their creativity. And so these things are very important to me, and I feel like I get all of that out of playing mass. The bottom line is that I feel like it's super unhealthy for people to police other people's bodies. There's so much that I want to say, you guys, but it also brings me to the idea of toxic sexuality. And that term is used to describe the concept that women will operate in any capacity solely for the male gaze. And it's something that I take a lot of issue with because I know that when I put my costume on, I'm doing it for me. I'm doing it because it's what I want to do, and it's the way that I'm choosing to express myself. And so to look at something that's so deeply rooted in my culture and reduce it to something that I would participate in solely for the male gaze is problematic to me. And toxic sexuality also plays into the lack of consent that is so normalized in society. For instance, the idea that if a woman is showing too much skin, she should expect to be catcalled or expect to be touched without providing consent, like a whole array of things. All in all, mass has done wonders for me, and I can't wait to be back on the road. Okay, so second on my list is journaling, and journaling has helped me in so many ways, not just with this, but really with all of the topics that we've spoken about here on Journey to You, having a space to write about my thoughts and my feelings unfiltered is so key. And it's nice to not have to put that on to somebody else. And it gives me another opportunity to filter my thoughts and feelings before articulating them to other people. And so before we go out and look for safe spaces, I think it's important to create them ourselves when and where we can. So everyone, those are my thoughts on the topic. And I just want to mention once again that no one person is innately promiscuous. It's very important to acknowledge the biases that affect Black women and girls negatively. Conditioning plays a large part in this, but I don't believe we'll see a lot of improvement until we take steps to shift our perspective. So that's it for today's episode, everyone. Thank you so much for watching and for holding space for me as I work through these things. It means so much to me, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.